Josie and the Pussycats 105. Alex tells Josie and her friends that he tricked his sister into thinking she has a magic mirror, and tells them to follow him to go see. I guess he's disguising his voice so she won't get suspicious. Since she's already got access to witchcraft, it makes sense that she'd believe she has a magic mirror. At least her brother's flattering her instead of insulting her when he pretends to be the mirror. But then he tells her Josie's the most loved, and she gets mad somehow when she should have known most people would hate her. Josie and Valerie show how nice they really are by getting offended by Alex's prank, calling it nasty, even though Alexandra's a jerk. And then Alexandra gets suspicious because that mirror talks only through her witchcraft, so it wouldn't give her an answer she wouldn't want. Then why did she even care about what it said to her? It'd be like being genuinely flattered by her complimenting herself. So she discovers a hidden camera and finds out the mirror is wired for sound. He should have known better than to prank someone with witchcraft at her disposal. But to be fair, he didn't know she'd find out. Never mind, he planned on playing the tape in front of her. Even though I should have known he'd get hexed for it. He sure is brave. She casts a spell to make things talk around Alex that shouldn't be able to. And only he can hear them because it's actually all in his head. In the next story, Alex wastes time with Josie, who's somehow dumb enough to turn down his offers to buy stuff, and eventually his sister pulls him away from her lecturing him. He begs her to use magic to make Josie like him, even though fake love is meaningless, and it just embarrasses her when someone inevitably snaps their fingers to break the spell. How did it take this long to happen? Josie ends up too infatuated with him, something he should have expected after an earlier love spell. And somehow, he doesn't even appreciate it. It makes sense that he wouldn't want to be choked. And since Alexandra never wanted to do this in the first place, it makes sense that she'd screw up the spell to teach him a lesson. Even if it is stupid of her, since she knows that with Josie out of the way, Alan would be all to herself. After an overly long amount of padding, she does say he's learned his lesson, implying she did this on purpose, and undoes the spell. After Josie rejects him, and he goes back to offering her a soda, Alexandra casts a spell out of spite to send him into the ocean. She then lampshades how confusing he is, when he actually thanks her for that. In the first story by Frank Doyle, Alexandra finds out Alex spoke from behind her magic mirror and tricked her. You'd think she'd find out the second she heard him speak, because she's used to hearing it talk already. So she gets back at him with magic at the end. There's not much to say because the prank goes on for too long, and usually is nice enough to flatter her anyways. So it's not much of a prank. How's he dumb enough to prank someone with magic? The second story by Dick Malmgren has Alex ask for a love spell on Josie, and it backfires because she makes her come on too strong and hurt him on purpose. Josie and the Pussycats issue 106. Alexandra brings her cat to a store and gets called out on it because it's against the rules. Somehow she doesn't decide to brainwash the owner instantly, and makes Josie and her friends unable to question his change in attitude. Valerie tells her she told her so she gets offended enough to hex her into damaging things, which gets her kicked out of the store. And Josie is such a loyal friend that she leaves the store with her. Valerie says she never touched those things. Would there be security footage of that supernatural experience? A spy witch must have altered the footage later. Clearly if Sebastian keeps getting magic refills so he's already being monitored and taken care of by Della, he'd also have a witch assigned to him. Alexandra would get one too to cover up magic for her because the spy witch would see her. And she's just lucky witches don't want to punish people for abusing magic. Some women speak in an overly rude way, and Alexandra demonizes feminism despite being a woman, acting like it makes women like this. So I'm not sure whose side the writer is on because all of them are portrayed as jerks. And it's pretty confusing for an 80s comic. One of the tomboys pushes the other for no reason, and that gets her to accidentally bump into Valerie, who complains and gets them to decide to attack them. But out of nowhere, Alexandra cares about Josie enough to save her. She decides to hex them into feeling like they're on fire, and that causes them to jump into the fountain. While this inconveniences them, the fact remains that it's still a rare good use of her magic that officially makes it worth it for obvious reasons. The story ends with the jerks getting banned from the mall just for jumping into a fountain, and Sebastian purring at Alexandra as she happily makes a predictable excuse for her heroism. In the next story with Alexandra, she wastes time complaining about Alan and Josie as usual. Somehow, after Alex snarks that she's more than just available, she doesn't even react to it. After too many wasted panels, including a boring scene with Alan getting lied to, Alexandra casts a spell to get Josie and Alex rained on. It's dumb of her to wonder how Alex got wet. After Alex wastes my time trying to get Josie to leave and she walks away, a spell gets cast to make her posterior larger, and it's a turnoff to Alex. In this issue by Frank Doyle, the first story has Alexandra hex Valerie into getting kicked out of the store, but then do the best thing she ever did and make sure she and Josie won't get beaten up for complaining about being bumped into. In the second story, as Alexandra's hexing to get Alan to herself end up failing, because Alex keeps getting Alan away from Josie before his spells get cast, which gets him to be the victim of them instead. And this is the last issue of the comic. The next story after this with Alexandra as a witch is Archie's TV Laugh Out 90. I had to search for Alexandra 1983 on comics.org to find it. Alexandra fawns over Alan in his car as he keeps smiling instead of being annoyed, as if he somehow can't hear her. It's surprising that he's nice to her and even agrees to hop in, because I thought he hated her. He tells her to drive him to a service station because he's getting his car fixed. He thanks her, as she's angry that Josie's waiting for him there. And she complains that if she had known Josie would be meeting him there, she wouldn't have done a favor for someone she expects me to believe she loves. Even though Josie didn't even do anything to earn her brownie points with Alan. As she shows her cat affection because he's the one she's nice to, she uses magic wanting his car to refuse to run, and Josie doesn't mind having to walk. Shouldn't Alexandra have realized that this wouldn't help her because now Josie has even more quality time with them? Now he gets to walk her home, so she ruined his car for nothing. So it's a good thing her engine conks out on her as karma. She thinks that if she can find them, they'll be at her mercy. Her engine stalls, and she at least gets Rin to say that she could fix it in no time if she knew where to zap. At least the writer cared enough to try to provide an explanation for why she didn't magically fix the problem instantly, but it's still a very flimsy excuse, because you'd think she could zap up an entirely new car that looks just like her old one. So it'd be as she remembered it without the problem. And witches never need to know all of the information to use magic properly, which is why they can conjure up living beings and inanimate objects without knowing how they work, and what they're made of chemically. So this is the wrong way to give her karma. Then some people walk up to her, who are drawn like stereotypical untrustworthy thugs, giving the bad message that you should always judge a book by its cover. Since while they offer to help her with her car trouble, and she at least thanks them like a nice person, she comes back to it and sees that they stole from it. She screams that the car was stripped down, and thankfully when Alan gets told what happened, he and Josie sympathize with her. But ultimately it's not good that they saw her and talked to her, because without any witnesses, she would have just used magic to fix this problem effortlessly. Or at least warped home. If anything, the thieves should have done her a favor, because now she'd have an unignorable excuse to create a new car. Instead, she decides to walk home with them. But at least that makes sense because she'd want to walk with someone she has a crush on. This story is about Alexandra getting jealous that Josie was waiting for Alan after she drove him to the service station and abusing her magic to ruin his car, when it's not his fault he likes Josie instead of her. And when she's on the way to them in her own car, it breaks down. There's a flimsy excuse that she doesn't know where to aim a beam to fix the car, even though she could zap up an entirely new one that looks just like her old one. And she looks like an idiot by trusting people to fix her car when the artist draws them to look like stereotypical old-fashioned cartoon thugs. She's supposed to be cynical, and I doubt a rich jerk like her would be above judging someone by their looks. So I don't care how desperate she is for help. There's no way she'd trust them when she could just use magic to make a new car. You'd hope that when she said it won't work, she'd be saying that from assuming that they were going to mug her, because she knows she can magically defend herself. But instead, her being a witch did nothing for her, and she ends up having to walk home. Too bad she's not written to admit that she appreciates getting to spend time with Alan at the end. I get that she deserves the car breaking down, but the car getting its tires stolen isn't something that Josie suffered through. Though at the same time, she could zap up a new car or car parts, so this means literally nothing. But it's still something that would feel like it has shocking impact because it's a dark thing that happens to people in real life. Going a bit too far for karma against the bratty teenager. It's not like it taught her a lesson to stop abusing magic. It didn't happen because of magic. It happened because she trusted menacing-looking strangers. This would only make her even more bitter. That being said, if the writer doesn't like this character, that's totally understandable. RJ's TV Lab about 94. This was my introduction to the stories where Alex's sister casts spells. She finds out Josie's gonna go to a resort, and it's obvious that she's jealous because she says dumb and stupid too much. It makes a weak rationalization that she's gonna show them what a waste of money the resort is. And her black cat shows that he's able to think like a person and knows exactly what's gonna happen next because she does this a lot. Josie goes to the resort, Melody takes a phrase too literally, and their enemy gets jealous of the guys drooling over her at the pool and uses magic to make Melody get thrown into it. This gives one of the guys an excuse to save her and ask her out. But at the dance, she uses magic to make Josie slide, embarrassing her. Her friends help her walk, looking concerned, and this time, nothing good happens to her right away to offset the spell. The next day, Alexandra casts another spell. One of the girls politely compliments the resort and finds out that her money was replaced with play money. And then the desk clerk suddenly threatens to call the police on her, which is unlikable of him. Josie's actually smart by saying they could work this out. And that evening, some people get impressed by Josie's band making a lot of money for the resort, and one of them wants to keep them around for weeks. Alexandra complains, somehow calling Josie and her friends nerds, and her cat makes it clear in his thoughts that he doesn't like her because she's evil, which is a good way to set him apart from Salem. But he looked evil when he first showed up. So good thing he got character development from seeing what a bad example Alexandra is. This story by Frank Doyle is about Alexandra getting jealous that Josie is going to a resort and trying to use magic to embarrass her into leaving early. But she completely fails and just makes things a lot better for her and her friends. Well, she does get one moment of genuine competence. It's forgettable compared to how much she failed. I like seeing magic get used and the jerk character fail most of the time. Too bad Josie doesn't keep her being a witch consistent. Because I want to read all the stories where witchcraft livens up their boring series. I don't think there are any stories with the label Alexandra. Josie and the Pussycats, 1993, Issue 1. This is the last new story with Alexandra's magical powers. After Josie and Alex have a boring conversation and go to a car, Alexandra appears with magic and says that turning into a fish to eavesdrop on them was a bad idea. She wants to check out the Zach they were talking about because he sounds interesting, because of his bad reputation. She warps to Zach's place and ends up going to Alex, who calls her crazy for wearing a special jewel. It's so special, I can't really notice it. The artist should have done a better job making it look like a pretty gem. Josie doesn't like the look in Zach's eye, and Valerie decides to call some friends and run a check on him. And just because she knows to call these convenient people we never heard of, she instantly finds out he's a notorious thief. Then how did he not get arrested already instead of still owning a club? It's way too convenient how she found out. And it didn't even need to happen because Josie was already suspicious of him, and so was Alex. And Alexandra says happily that he's already got her jewel and calls him a smooth operator, just to get mad because her father will cut off her credit cards for it. Why did she let him steal from her if she has powers like that? She's told off for taking the jewel out of the vault, and explains why she probably let him steal it. There's a curse on it put on it by the high priest of a tribe with an unusual name. She's asked why the curse didn't affect her, and surprisingly, she outright admits that the witchcraft she and Sebastian share cancels the curse out. And the next panel isn't her being called crazy or a liar. We don't even see them stare at her. Either they're too polite to insult her, even though they're not above that at all, or they found out she had magic off screen already, and Alex knows about that. It's very weird to keep that off screen. She tells her cat to help her with mental projection, and tells the girls to play some soothing music, and she says that music always helps, which is just confusing because it was never used from before. She says that Sebastian's projecting Zach's image in a copter on the roof. The copter Zach's in starts stalling out, and he jumps out of it and lands in a giant container of purple liquid, and wonders if he's cursed. Just because he jumped over a fence into a pig pen, he assumes the jewel's jinxed and gives it to Alan. I don't think someone who loves taking risks enough to steal a lot would give up a valuable jewel because of a string of bad luck, when he only had to suffer 3 times, and all he had to do was get it to a black market to sell it and he'd be rid of the curse. Most people would shrug it off as coincidence, or at least put up with it because he wouldn't have it for very long. He was guaranteed bad luck anyway, so the only thing Alexandra's magic did was make sure Alan would know where to go to find him. It'd have been more satisfying if we saw her directly cast spells to make this stuff happen to him. This story by Frank Doyle was about Alexandra going to a club Josie was gonna play at because she eavesdropped on her in fish form and heard that he's got a bad reputation. He steals her jewel off screen even though she's got witchcraft. It'd be better to see that instead of seeing Valerie conveniently call some strangers and magically find out Zach's a thief for no reason, when we didn't need her to be able to discover that when he'd reveal himself anyways. I have to assume Alexandra let him steal the jewel because she knew the curse would punish him. The most confusing thing about the story is that she reveals she used witchcraft to be immune to it when asked about it, but the Pussycats show no reaction to this, when she used to keep it a secret, and they never knew she was a witch before. But if they did, they shouldn't have wondered why she was immune to the curse. I don't know why her stories were so sloppy about the rules. But this is the same series that thought abandoning something as interesting as her having witchcraft was a good idea. It was entertaining to see how the bad luck curse bothered Zach. But it'd have felt better if it was Alexandra using her magic on him directly, because this would have happened to him anyways. Well, all her magic did was tell Alan that Zach was in a copter so he could go after him for the jewel. But she could have warped the jewel back to her at any point, so she didn't even need to do this. Maybe she only cast this spell instead because she thought it was cooler and wanted to show off.